The strangest thing about losing your marriage is that sometimes it doesn't end with a fight. Sometimes it ends with a birthday gift. My wife opened hers in front of 43 people, smiled for exactly 3 seconds, and then forgot how to breathe. The music was still playing. The champagne was still flowing. The laughter was still bouncing off the walls of the private event room overlooking Lake Travis. But something had changed. You could feel it, like the moment before a summer storm finally breaks. Olivia Brooks sat at the center of the room beneath a banner that read Happy 45th Birthday. Her friends surrounded her. Her coworkers surrounded her. Her family surrounded her. The candles had already been blown out. The cake had already been cut. Most of the gifts had already been opened. Designer handbags, jewelry, spa packages, wine subscriptions, the kinds of presents people buy when they want to be remembered. Then the final package arrived. No ribbon, no decoration, just a plain white box delivered by a courier 10 minutes earlier. My name was written on the return label. Nathan Brooks. Her husband. Or at least I still was at that moment. Olivia smiled when she saw my name. Several people laughed. Someone at the table joked that I'd probably bought her another practical gift. A vacuum cleaner. A kitchen appliance. Something boring. Olivia laughed louder than anyone. The room laughed with her. Then she opened the box. Inside was a single envelope. Nothing else. The smile stayed on her face for another second before curiosity replaced it. She slid a finger beneath the seal and unfolded the documents inside. I wasn't there to watch it happen. But later, enough people told me the story that I could picture every detail. Her eyes moved across the first page, then stopped. The color drained from her face so quickly that one of her friends asked if she was feeling okay. She didn't answer. She kept reading. The room slowly grew quieter. One conversation ended. Then another. Then another. Until the only sound left was the soft hum of the air conditioning. Someone finally asked what was wrong. Olivia looked up. For the first time in years, she had no answer. Because lying becomes difficult when the truth is sitting in your hands. The envelope contained 3 things. A letter, a key, and divorce papers. That was the moment everyone noticed my empty chair. The chair beside hers. The one reserved for the husband who never showed up. The husband she thought would always show up. The husband she believed would tolerate anything. What none of them knew was that this story didn't begin at her birthday party. It began 14 days earlier on a Thursday night at exactly 8:17 p.m. I remember the time because some moments carve themselves into your memory with surgical precision. You remember the lighting, the temperature, the smell in the air. You remember everything because your life divides itself into before and after. That evening I pulled into our driveway, carrying takeout from a barbecue place Olivia liked. The sky was turning orange over Cedar Park. The Texas heat was finally beginning to loosen its grip on the day. I was tired. Not the dramatic kind of tired. Just ordinary middle-aged tired. The kind that comes from paying bills, solving problems, and spending 20 years making sure everyone else's life stays comfortable. I remember thinking how nice it would be to eat dinner together. Maybe watch a movie. Maybe spend a quiet evening at home. Funny how little a man can know about his own future. As I walked toward the front door, I heard voices inside. Olivia had friends over. That wasn't unusual. The laughter drifting through the house sounded warm. Familiar. Safe. For a moment I smiled. Then I reached for the doorknob and heard a sentence that stopped me cold. I don't love Nathan anymore. The laughter continued. I froze. My hand remained on the door. My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That's what shock does sometimes. It doesn't hit like lightning. It settles like ice. Then Olivia laughed. A laugh I'd spent 21 years loving. A laugh I'd crossed state lines to hear when we were dating. A laugh I'd once believed would always feel like home. Honestly, she said, her voice light and casual, if he vanished before my birthday, that'd be the best gift anyone could give me. The room erupted, and standing alone on the other side of that door, I listened to every second of it. For a few seconds, I just stood there with my hand on the doorknob. The barbecue takeout felt heavier than it should have. The smell of smoked brisket and baked beans drifted from the paper bag, mixing with the sound of laughter coming from inside my own house. I wish I could tell you I burst through the door. I wish I could tell you I confronted everyone, that I demanded answers, that I defended myself. But real life rarely works that way. The truth is much quieter. I simply listened. Rachel Turner laughed first. I recognized her voice immediately. She had been Olivia's closest friend for nearly 15 years. Then another woman chimed in. Then another. Their laughter blended together until I could no longer tell who was speaking. Only one voice mattered anyway. Olivia's. The woman I had spent 21 years loving sounded completely relaxed. Comfortable. Almost relieved. As if she had finally said something she had been carrying for a very long time. I should have walked away. Instead, I stayed frozen beside the front door while pieces of my marriage drifted through the wall one sentence at a time. Looking back, that was not the moment my marriage ended. It only felt like it. The truth was much harder to accept. My marriage had probably been ending for years. I just never wanted to see it. When you love someone long enough, you become an expert at explaining away things that should concern you. A missed anniversary becomes stress. A cold response becomes exhaustion. A lack of affection becomes a busy schedule. You build excuses the way other people build fences. One board at a time. I had spent years building those fences. Olivia and I met when we were both 24 years old. She was ambitious, funny, and impossible to ignore. We started with nothing. A tiny apartment outside Austin. Furniture bought secondhand. A dining table that wobbled every time someone touched it. We used paper plates because we could not afford a matching set of dishes. Back then, every victory felt shared. Every setback felt temporary. We were a team. At least I thought we were. As the years passed, life improved. Promotions came. Raises followed. We bought our first house. Then a better one. Vacations became possible. The struggles became smaller. The bank account became larger. From the outside, it looked like success. But success has a strange way of hiding problems. The better life became, the less we talked. The less we talked, the easier it became to pretend everything was fine. A memory surfaced as I stood outside that door. 6 months earlier, Olivia had hosted a dinner party. One of her co-workers asked what I did for fun. Before I could answer, Olivia smiled and said, "Nathan's hobby is making sure everyone else has what they need." The table laughed. I laughed too. It sounded harmless at the time. But driving home later that night, I remember feeling strangely small. Another memory followed. A charity fundraiser last fall. Someone mistakenly assumed I was part of the catering staff because I was helping clean up after the event. Before I could correct them, Olivia said, "Honestly, that sounds about right." Everyone chuckled, including me. That was the worst part. I laughed along because I did not want to create tension. I laughed because I loved her. Standing outside that door, those moments returned with painful clarity. Like photographs developing in a darkroom. Details I had ignored suddenly became impossible to miss. The jokes. The dismissive comments. The eye rolls. The way she stopped reaching for my hand years ago. The way she stopped asking how my day went. The way she looked through me instead of at me. What I heard that night did not create the cracks. It simply revealed them. Inside the house, another burst of laughter echoed through the room. I finally took a breath. Then another. My heart was steady. That surprised me. I expected anger. I expected heartbreak. Instead, I felt something colder. Something clearer. For the first time in years, I stopped wondering how to save my marriage. And I started wondering what my life would look like without it. I never opened the front door that night. Instead, I turned around, walked back to my truck, and sat behind the steering wheel while the Texas sunset faded into darkness. The takeout rested untouched on the passenger seat. The dashboard clock glowed 8:29 p.m., then 8:41, then 9:03. I just sat there. Not because I was deciding what to do. Because for the first time in a very long time, I was allowing myself to see what had already happened. People think heartbreak arrives all at once. It does not. Most of the time, it arrives in pieces. Small enough to ignore. Small enough to explain away. Until one day you look down and realize you have been carrying the entire weight of it for years. As I sat there, memories kept surfacing. Not dramatic moments. Ordinary ones. The kind that never seem important when they happen. About 3 years earlier, I had spent an entire weekend building a pergola in our backyard because Olivia mentioned wanting a shaded sitting area. I worked in 90-degree heat. Measured every board twice. Installed every piece myself. When I finally finished, exhausted and proud, she walked outside, glanced at it for maybe 5 seconds, and said, "It is nice. Rachel's husband hired professionals, and theirs looks a little better." At the time, I laughed. I told myself she did not mean anything by it. But sitting in that truck, I remembered exactly how quiet the drive to the hardware store had been afterward. Then there was our 20th anniversary. I spent weeks planning a trip to Napa Valley. Reservations, flights, a vineyard tour, everything. The night I surprised her with the itinerary, she barely looked up from her phone. "That weekend does not work," she said. I already promised Rachel I would help organize an event. No apology, no discussion, just a scheduling conflict. We never took the trip. The printed reservations stayed folded inside my desk drawer for almost a year before I threw them away. Looking back, what hurt was not the cancellation. It was how easy it seemed for her. Like our anniversary occupied the same level of importance as a dentist appointment. The hardest memories were the smallest ones. The everyday moments. The ones nobody else would notice. The way she stopped texting me during the day. The way she stopped saying good morning. The way she no longer asked if I made it safely to work. 21 years together, and somehow we had become roommates sharing expenses instead of partners sharing a life. I remember one Saturday morning 6 months earlier. We were having breakfast at a diner outside Austin. The place smelled like coffee and maple syrup. A retired couple sat across the room, holding hands in their booth. I noticed them smiling at each other. Olivia noticed them too. "I cannot imagine still acting like that after all those years," she said. Then she laughed and looked back at her menu. At the time, I forced a smile. But something about that comment stayed with me. Because I could imagine it. I wanted that. I always had. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a husband in her eyes and became part of the furniture. Reliable, useful, invisible. What I realized sitting in my truck was that none of those moments had been accidents. They formed a pattern I spent years refusing to acknowledge. The comments, the dismissals, the indifference, they all pointed in the same direction. The conversation I overheard had not changed Olivia. It had simply revealed her. That realization should have made me angry. Instead, it made me tired. Deeply tired. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones after carrying something far longer than you should have. Around 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Where are you?" Just 3 words. No concern, no affection, no explanation for what I had heard. Because she did not know I had heard anything at all. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then another message arrived. "Do not forget to pick up ice for Saturday." That was it. Not a question about my day. Not a request to come home. Just a reminder about supplies for her birthday party. I looked at those messages and felt something inside me become perfectly still. For years I had been fighting to save something that only existed in my memory. The marriage I loved was not dying. It was already gone. I was simply the last person to notice. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise after barely sleeping at all. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that usually feels peaceful, but somehow did not. Pale blue light slipped through the kitchen windows. The coffee maker hummed. The refrigerator clicked on and off. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary morning. Ordinary life. Except nothing felt ordinary anymore. Olivia came downstairs around 7. Dressed for work. Phone already in her hand. She kissed the air somewhere near my cheek while checking a message on her screen. "Morning," she said. Then she poured herself coffee without looking at me. For years, I would have searched her face for clues. I would have wondered if she was upset, distracted, stressed. I would have tried to solve whatever problem stood between us. That morning I did none of those things. I simply watched. It was amazing what became visible once I stopped making excuses. She talked about decorations for her birthday party, about reservations, about guests, about a bakery mistake involving the cake design. Her voice carried the same energy someone might use discussing office supplies. Light, casual, effortless. There was no sign of guilt, no sign of concern. Certainly no sign that she had spent the previous evening telling her friends that my disappearance would be the perfect gift. When she finally left for work, the garage door rumbled shut behind her. I stood alone in the kitchen holding a coffee mug and realized something important. For the first time in years, I was not afraid of losing my marriage. I had already lost it. That changed everything. People imagine major life decisions happen in dramatic moments. They do not. Most happen quietly. Mine happened while staring at a half-empty coffee cup beside a bowl of fruit. No music, no speeches, no grand revelation. Just a simple thought. I am done fighting for someone who stopped fighting for me. The sentence landed with surprising calm. Then another thought followed. If I was done fighting, what came next? I spent the rest of the morning answering that question. First, I called my office and took personal leave for the afternoon. Then I drove across town to meet someone I had not spoken to in nearly 3 years. Benjamin Hayes, an attorney. We met at a small office building near downtown Austin. Nothing fancy. Beige walls, neutral carpet, a waiting room that smelled faintly of printer paper and fresh coffee. Benjamin greeted me with a firm handshake and an expression that immediately told me he understood this was not a social visit. He listened carefully while I explained the situation. Not every detail, just enough. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he asked a question nobody else had ever asked. "Nathan, what do you actually want?" The answer came faster than I expected. "Peace." Benjamin nodded. "Not money. Not revenge. Not punishment. Peace." Hearing myself say it out loud clarified everything. I did not want to destroy Olivia. I did not want to embarrass her. I simply wanted to stop living inside a relationship where my value depended entirely on what I provided. Over the next hour, we reviewed options, practical steps, financial considerations, property documents. Nothing emotional, just facts. Oddly enough, facts felt comforting. Facts did not lie. Facts did not change depending on mood or convenience. By the time I left his office, a framework had begun to take shape. A plan. Simple, quiet, clean. As I walked back to my truck, warm Texas air rolled across the parking lot. The sky stretched bright and cloudless above the city. For the first time in a very long while, my shoulders felt lighter. Not because the future looked easy. It did not. 21 years cannot be untangled without pain. But a strange thing happens when you finally accept the truth. The endless confusion disappears. That evening, Olivia came home carrying shopping bags and excitement about her upcoming birthday celebration. She talked for nearly 20 minutes without noticing how little I said. She never asked where I had been. Never asked why I seemed different. Never noticed that something fundamental had shifted. Sitting across from her at the dinner table, I realized she was still looking at the version of me that existed yesterday. The man willing to tolerate anything. The man desperate to hold everything together. What she did not know was that man was already gone. The next 14 days passed with a strange sense of clarity. Not happiness. Not relief. Just clarity. Every morning I woke up knowing exactly what I needed to do. There was no more second-guessing. No more wondering whether I was overreacting. No more late-night conversations with myself about how to fix something that only one person wanted to save. I moved carefully, quietly, like a man packing up a house before a storm arrives. During the day, I handled practical matters. Meetings with Benjamin, financial paperwork, property documents, account reviews. Every signature felt oddly unemotional. 21 years of marriage reduced to folders and forms. Yet each completed task brought a little more peace. Meanwhile, Olivia became more excited with every passing day. Her birthday party was all she talked about. The guest list grew larger. The decorations became more elaborate. The menu changed 3 separate times. One evening, she spent nearly 40 minutes showing me different centerpiece options on her phone. I nodded politely and listened, not because I cared about the flowers, because I was realizing something important. Olivia never noticed the difference in me. She never noticed I stopped asking about her day. She never noticed I stopped sharing details about mine. She never noticed that I had become a guest in my own home. Looking back, that hurt more than the conversation I overheard. One Saturday afternoon, about a week before her birthday, we attended a neighborhood barbecue. People gathered beneath string lights while country music drifted across the lawns. Children ran through sprinklers. Dogs chased tennis balls. The kind of scene that belongs on a postcard. At one point, a neighbor asked how long Olivia and I had been married. 21 years, I answered. The neighbor smiled and said, "That is impressive. What is the secret?" Before I could respond, Olivia laughed. "Nathan is easy to keep around. He never causes trouble." Everyone chuckled, including the neighbor, including Olivia. I smiled too, but this time I saw it differently. Not as a joke, not as harmless teasing. I saw it for what it was. Respect had quietly left our marriage years ago. I just kept pretending it was still there. The night before her birthday party, Olivia stayed up late organizing final details. Gift tables, seating arrangements, music playlists. Around midnight, she stood in the living room admiring the decorations. Soft light from the chandelier reflected across the room. For a moment, she looked genuinely happy. "Everything is perfect," she said. Then she turned toward me. "You are coming early tomorrow, right?" The question almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was ironic. She wanted me present for the celebration. She wanted me there for the photographs, for appearances, for convenience. Yet 2 weeks earlier she had described my disappearance as the perfect gift. I looked at her and felt no anger. That surprised me. The anger had already burned away. What remained was acceptance. "Do not worry," I said calmly. "Everything will be taken care of." She smiled, satisfied with the answer. The next morning arrived bright and warm. Texas sunshine poured through the windows. By noon, guests began arriving at the event venue overlooking Lake Travis. Olivia spent the afternoon surrounded by friends, family, co-workers, and endless compliments. Her phone filled with birthday messages. Photographs appeared online. Glasses clinked. Music played. The celebration unfolded exactly the way she wanted. Meanwhile, I stood inside a small apartment on the other side of Austin. The apartment was modest, clean, quiet, temporary. A place that contained only the things I actually needed. A couch, a bed, a coffee maker, a few boxes, nothing more. I remember standing beside the window looking out at the parking lot below. My wedding ring rested in my palm. 21 years reduced to a circle of gold. Funny how something so small can carry so much history. I turned it over once between my fingers, then placed it inside an envelope. Beside it sat a letter, a key, and documents that would officially end one chapter of my life. The courier was scheduled to arrive at the venue at exactly 7 o'clock. I checked the time. 6:58. Then 6:59. Somewhere across the city, Olivia was probably smiling for photographs, probably laughing with friends, probably believing the evening belonged entirely to her. Then the clock changed to 7 o'clock, and the final part of my plan began. At exactly 7 o'clock, the courier walked through the doors of the event venue carrying a plain white box. Nobody paid much attention at first. Why would they? Birthday parties are filled with deliveries. Flowers arrive. Cakes arrive. Last-minute gifts arrive. The box looked ordinary. That was the point. Across the room, Olivia stood beneath soft golden lights with a champagne glass in her hand. Laughter drifted between tables. A live acoustic guitarist played near the windows overlooking Lake Travis. The water reflected the last colors of the sunset. Everything looked polished, expensive, perfect. The courier approached one of the event staff and quietly asked for Olivia Brooks. Within minutes, the box found its way to the gift table. At first, it disappeared among the other presents. Designer bags, decorative wrapping paper, oversized bows. Nobody noticed that one package carried no decoration at all. Then someone spotted my name on the return label. "Looks like Nathan finally sent something," one of Olivia's co-workers joked. A few people laughed. Olivia smiled. "About time," she said lightly. Her friends encouraged her to open it immediately. The larger gifts had already been opened. Most of the evening's surprises were gone. The party had settled into that comfortable stage where people relaxed into conversation and another round of drinks. The white box offered one last moment of entertainment. Olivia carried it to the center table while several guests gathered around. Phones appeared. More photographs. More smiles. She seemed genuinely pleased. Looking back, that was probably the last carefree moment she experienced for a very long time. She lifted the lid. The room remained cheerful, casual. Then confusion crossed her face. There was no jewelry, no keepsake, no birthday card, only an envelope. Several people exchanged puzzled looks. Someone joked that maybe I had hidden concert tickets inside. Olivia laughed softly and opened the envelope. The first document appeared. She unfolded it slowly. Her smile faded. Not dramatically, not all at once. It simply weakened, like a light bulb losing power. Her eyes moved across the page, then stopped. She blinked once, then twice. A woman standing nearby asked if everything was okay. Olivia did not answer. She continued reading. The silence began spreading through the room, one conversation at a time. People noticed the change in her expression. The guitarist kept playing. Glasses still clinked, but the energy shifted. Guests sensed something was wrong even before they understood why. Olivia lowered the first page and reached for the second. That was when someone noticed her hands trembling slightly. Rachel Turner stepped closer. "Olivia," she asked. No response, only reading. The second document was impossible to misunderstand. Divorce papers tend to have that effect. Legal language removes all ambiguity. Questions became whispers. Whispers became silence. Olivia looked around the room as though she expected me to appear from somewhere. From behind a table. from a nearby hallway, from a doorway. But I was not there. My chair remained empty. The realization settled across her face in slow motion. This was not a misunderstanding, not a prank, not a temporary argument. Something permanent had happened. Then she discovered the key taped inside the envelope. House key, garage key, mailbox key, every key connected to our life together. People watched without speaking. Nobody knew where to look. Some stared at the table. Others stared out the windows. A few pretended to check their phones. Social gatherings have strange rules. Everyone wants to witness the moment. Nobody wants to become part of it. Rachel finally picked up the letter. "Should I call Nathan?" she asked quietly. Olivia shook her head. The movement looked automatic, like she was still trying to understand what she had already read. Then her phone appeared in her hand. She dialed my number. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Across the city, I sat quietly in the apartment beside a dark window with my phone powered off on the kitchen counter. For the first time in years, there was no noise. No tension. No confusion. Just silence. Meanwhile, inside the venue, the celebration continued collapsing around the envelope resting in the center of the table. Because the guests had only seen the documents, they had not yet read the letter. And the letter contained the one thing Olivia never expected me to say. For several long seconds, nobody touched the letter. It sat on the table beside the empty envelope, like something fragile and dangerous at the same time. Olivia stared at it. Rachel stared at it. The guests stared at it. Finally, Rachel unfolded the pages and began reading. The room had grown so quiet that the faint sound of the lake outside seemed louder than the people inside. The letter began simply. "Olivia, if you are reading this, then I am exactly where you wanted me to be. Gone." Several people shifted uncomfortably. Rachel continued. 14 days ago, I came home carrying your favorite barbecue dinner. Before I opened the front door, I heard something I was never supposed to hear. I heard laughter. Then I heard your voice. Then I heard the sentence that changed everything." Rachel paused. Her eyes moved lower on the page. The color slowly drained from her face. Olivia whispered, "Keep reading." Rachel swallowed and continued. "You said you did not love me anymore. Then you said if I vanished before your birthday, it would be the best gift anyone could give you." A silence settled across the room so complete that nobody dared interrupt it. Some guests lowered their eyes immediately. Others stared directly at Olivia. A few looked toward the exits as if suddenly wishing they were somewhere else. Rachel kept reading. What surprised me most was not hearing those words. It was hearing everyone laugh afterward. Every laugh told me something I had spent years refusing to understand. I was the only person still pretending my marriage existed. Olivia's hands tightened around the edge of the table. Rachel's voice became quieter. "The strange thing is that hearing the truth did not break my heart. The truth finally explained it. It explained every joke, every dismissal, every anniversary that seemed inconvenient, every conversation where I felt invisible. It explained why I spent years trying harder while receiving less and less in return." One of Olivia's co-workers slowly sat down. Another placed a hand over her mouth. The party no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a courtroom where nobody expected evidence to appear. Rachel continued reading. "For a long time, I thought love meant patience. I thought loyalty meant enduring anything. I thought if I kept showing up, eventually things would improve. I was wrong. Love without respect eventually becomes loneliness." Olivia looked away toward the windows. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass. Rachel read the next paragraph. "This is not revenge. Revenge requires anger. What I feel is clarity. I am not leaving because I hate you. I am leaving because somewhere along the way, I forgot that my own happiness mattered too. The man you married spent 21 years trying to build a life with you. The man writing this letter finally realized he deserves a life as well." Several people glanced at Olivia. Nobody laughed now. Nobody spoke. Rachel reached the final page. "You often said I was easy to keep around because I never caused trouble. The truth is simpler. I stayed because I loved you. But love cannot survive where respect no longer lives. So tonight, I am giving you exactly what you wished for. My absence." Rachel's voice nearly disappeared on the final lines. "I hope your birthday is everything you wanted it to be. I sincerely do. As for me, I am finally learning how to stop begging for a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. Goodbye, Olivia." "Nathan." When the reading ended, nobody moved. The guitarist had stopped playing several minutes earlier. The staff stood motionless near the walls. Even the servers seemed unsure whether they should continue working. Olivia stared at the letter as if seeing it for the first time. Then she grabbed her phone again and dialed my number. Straight to voicemail. She tried once more. Same result. Rachel quietly folded the letter and placed it back on the table. Nobody knew what to say because some truths are too obvious for words. For years, Olivia had believed I would always be there, always available, always waiting. And for the first time in 21 years, she was discovering what life looked like when I was not. The party ended less than an hour later. Not because anyone officially announced it. Because nobody knew how to continue celebrating after reading a goodbye letter written by a man, everyone suddenly realized they had misunderstood. Guests left quietly. Conversations became short, awkward, forced. The laughter that had filled the room earlier felt like it belonged to another night entirely. Olivia remained seated near the table long after most people had gone. The envelope rested beside her untouched birthday cake. Half-empty glasses reflected the dim lights overhead. Rachel stayed behind. So did a few close friends. Nobody seemed sure what to say. Every sentence sounded inadequate compared to the silence Nathan had left behind. Around 10 o'clock, Olivia drove home. The house greeted her exactly the way it always had. The same driveway, the same porch light, the same front door. Yet everything felt different. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. For a moment, she simply stood there. The living room looked normal. The furniture remained in place. Family photographs still lined the shelves. Nothing appeared broken. Nothing appeared damaged. But absence has a way of changing a room. The silence felt larger, colder. She called my name once. Then again. No answer. Of course there was no answer. She already knew that. Yet people often ask questions when they cannot accept the truth. Upstairs, she opened closets. Empty spaces greeted her. Not everything was gone. Just enough. A few shirts remained. Old shoes. Forgotten boxes. The essentials had disappeared. She moved from room to room searching for something she could not define. Evidence, perhaps. Proof that the letter had been exaggerated. Proof that I would return tomorrow. Proof that 21 years could not simply end with an envelope. But every room told the same story. This had been planned. Carefully. Quietly. Completely. Around midnight, her phone finally connected to Rachel. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. Rachel listened while Olivia repeated the same questions over and over. Why did he not tell me? Why did he not say something? Why did he not confront me? Rachel answered only once. Maybe he spent years saying things you stopped hearing. That sentence lingered long after the call ended. The next morning brought no relief. Olivia woke up hoping for a message. There was none. She checked her email repeatedly. Nothing. She refreshed social media. Nothing. No dramatic announcement. No public accusations. No attempts to embarrass her. I had simply disappeared from her daily life with the same quiet certainty that I used when paying bills or fixing things around the house. The following days became strangely difficult for her. Not because of legal paperwork. Not because of practical complications. Because reminders appeared everywhere. The coffee mug I always used. The empty side of the garage. The chair at the dining table. The grocery items I usually bought. Small things. Ordinary things. The kind of details people overlook until they vanish. One afternoon, she opened a hallway closet searching for batteries and found an old photo album instead. Vacation pictures. Road trips. Backyard barbecues. 21 years of memories staring back from glossy pages. In nearly every photograph, I was looking directly at her. Smiling. Present. Invested. She sat on the floor for a long time turning pages. Somewhere between the photographs and the silence, something uncomfortable began taking shape. Not guilt exactly. Understanding. For years, she had measured my value by my reliability, my consistency, my willingness to remain. She never stopped to consider that those qualities came from love. And love, when taken for granted long enough, eventually grows tired. Meanwhile, I remained exactly where I intended to be, in a small apartment filled with peace. The first few days felt strange. 21 years of habits do not disappear overnight. Sometimes I still reach for my phone expecting to text Olivia about something insignificant. A restaurant recommendation. A funny billboard. A weather forecast. Then I would remember. And instead of sadness, I felt calm. Because for the first time in years, I was no longer chasing approval from someone determined not to give it. The distance between us continued growing. One day at a time. One unanswered call at a time. One quiet morning at a time. And somewhere in that growing distance, Olivia finally began understanding the difference between losing a convenience and losing a person. 1 year later, I found myself standing beside the water at a small marina outside Corpus Christi. The morning air carried the smell of salt and sunlight. A gentle breeze rolled across the bay. Fishing boats rocked quietly against their slips. Life felt different now. Not perfect, not magical, just honest. And after everything that happened, honesty felt like a luxury. During that year, I learned things about myself I should have learned decades earlier. I learned that peace is not something another person gives you. It is something you stop surrendering. I learned that loyalty is valuable, but only when it flows both directions. Most importantly, I learned that self-respect and love are not enemies. They are partners. For months after I left, the divorce moved forward quietly. No public drama. No ugly battles. Just paperwork, signatures, and the slow closing of a chapter that had already ended long before either of us admitted it. I rented a better apartment, then eventually bought a small house of my own. I reconnected with old friends. I traveled. I started saying yes to opportunities instead of obligations. Somewhere along the way, the constant heaviness I carried for years finally disappeared. The strange thing was that I did not notice the exact day it happened. Healing rarely announces itself. One afternoon, you simply realize you have not been looking backward as often. Then one day you realize you are not looking backward at all. The last time I saw Olivia happened completely by accident. I was leaving a waterfront restaurant after lunch when I spotted a familiar figure standing near the parking lot. At first, I almost did not recognize her. Not because she looked older. We both did. Life does that. It was something else. The confidence she carried for years seemed quieter now. Softer. More uncertain. She noticed me at the same moment. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she slowly walked over. The conversation that followed lasted less than 10 minutes. We talked about ordinary things. Work. Health. Mutual friends. The weather. Two people discussing safe subjects while standing on top of a mountain of history. Finally, she looked at me and asked the question I think she had been carrying for an entire year. Were you really that unhappy? I looked out toward the water before answering. The sunlight danced across the surface in thousands of tiny reflections. No, I said calmly. That was the problem. I spent years convincing myself I was happy with less than I deserved. She lowered her eyes. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she nodded once. A small nod. The kind people give when they finally understand something they cannot change. We wished each other well. Then we walked away in opposite directions. No anger. No dramatic ending. No final argument. Just distance. Honest distance. As I reached my truck, I realized something important. I no longer needed her to understand my decision. I no longer needed validation. Closure had arrived long before that conversation. It arrived the moment I stopped measuring my worth through someone else's appreciation. People often believe the strongest ending is revenge. I disagree. The strongest ending is peace. Peace is waking up without resentment. Peace is no longer carrying a story that keeps hurting you. Peace is understanding that sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is simply walking away. And that is where my story ends. If you were in my position, what would you have done after hearing those words that night outside the front door? Would you have stayed and fought for the marriage? Or would you have chosen the same path I did? Let me know your thoughts because I genuinely want to hear them. And if stories like this remind you of the importance of self-respect, resilience, and knowing your value, consider subscribing so you do not miss the next journey. Sometimes the people who ask for your absence are the very people who never expected you to leave. And sometimes leaving is how you finally find your way home.